Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena for yet more DIY fun. We're getting really close to being ready to leave. There are a couple of key things we need to do first though. We do need to install and configure the alternator on the main engine, we need to get the genset moved aboard the boat, and we need to install and configure the autopilot. Those three items need to happen in that specific order for some practical reasons. And right now I'm waiting for some cable and a shunt to show up before we can move ahead with the alternator installation. And that's hopefully going to get here Friday, fingers crossed. But until then, there are plenty of other stuff we can work on, like for instance getting an electric bilge pump up and running, which we do not have right now, and also figuring out the greywater system, which, well, we don't really have either. If you're new to our channel, my name is Mess, this is my fiancée Ava. Our adventure started about 5 years ago when I purchased Athena. I've spent the last 5 years doing a somewhat extensive refit, complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, gutting the interior to make structural repairs, and then subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, rebuilding the entire deck to replace rotten core, painting the top sides, and tons of other fun projects that are documented right here on YouTube. We're only a few weeks away from being able to untie the lines and start the long journey to bring Athena from Europe to the US. But for now, we are still 100% in DIY mode. And speaking of that, ta-da! Athena's new bilge pump. Here we have two pumps from Wales IC series. One we're going to use for the bilge pump, that's this one up here, and the other one we're going to use for the greywater system in combination with this two-way manifold. The pumps in these two boxes are identical. They're both based on Wales Gulper pumps, which is a diaphragm pump that, at least in my experience, has a great reputation. This is the two-way manifold that will connect the drain from the shower and the sink in the vanity to this pump. There's also a sensor built into this, and this is the strainer and also sensor that's going to go inside of the bilge and be connected to this pump. I think the most common setup for a bilge pump is a submerged bilge pump with an integrated float switch. I've seen tons of those. Those are super easy to install, but you could also get a little bit more fancy and use an external float switch or something like this Ultima switch here, which is just a different way of turning on the pump. And you could use this with both a submerged pump or something like a diaphragm pump mounted outside of the bilge. That last solution is basically what this is. The strainer here has a built-in sensor so that the pump can sense when it needs to turn on. One of the big upsides to this is that the electronics for controlling the pump are mounted outside of the bilge and far away from the yucky bilge water. The most common greywater setup I've seen, meaning the drain from the shower and from sinks, is to have a sump with a float switch in it, and then that stuff gets pumped overboard. And that is, well, basically what this little manifold does. Just like the strainer for the bilge pump, there is a sensor built into this that'll turn on the pump. On the manifold, the sensor is installed on the outside, meaning it never comes into contact with the greywater. So I think this is going to be a really spiffy setup. And also, this setup is a lot smaller than having one of those shower sumps. Typically, those are a square little box about this size, and those can be hard to place. This should be a lot easier to find a spot for. Before we can install these two pumps and see them in action, my lovely assistant and I have to run a small mountain worth of hose. So we better get started with that. Yesterday, Ava and I busted out the dinghy to install the above the waterline through hole for the greywater and the bilge pump. The hole is about 10 inches above the waterline. I'd like to put it closer to the waterline, but it's the only place inside of the boat where we had room. With me inside of the boat and Ava outside of the boat, we made use of our spiffy new wireless communication headsets, nicknamed Marriage Savers. More about those later. Back to today. I connected the hose to the drain from the shower. This will be connected to one side of the manifold. Then we ran the 25mm hose from the sink to the manifold and the hose from the manifold towards the through hull. After much pushing and pulling, the two hoses got connected to a Y doohickey and then connected to the through hull. We've got all the hoses ready, popping up here, going behind the head, a big loop up behind the holding tank, and then connected to the through hull. But something else has popped up. I pulled the pumps out of their boxes just to start and figure out where to mount them, and also to check that the cables for the sensor doohickeys are long enough. And I noticed something. The connectors on these three here all seem to match. They're the same type, but on this pump over here, it's a completely different connector. This pump is supposed to connect to the manifold, but these two are in absolutely no way gonna be compatible. I've emailed Whale, the manufacturer of these, and I've emailed the store where I purchased the pump and the manifold. Mind you, these were purchased as a kit, so I was kind of expecting them to be compatible. Upon closer investigation on the pump with the good connector here, there's a nice little sticker on this fuse, but on the pump with the dodgy connector, that label has been torn off, and somebody has used a red marker to put a line on the leftovers of paper that's on there. So yeah, I don't know what the history is behind this pump. Stuff like this is incredibly frustrating. I absolutely hate starting a project and then not being able to finish it because of a missing part or a faulty product or whatever. Yeah, I know it's not the end of the world, but it is frustrating and it does potentially wreck my plans for this video. I have ordered an extra one of these Whaler Gulper IC pumps. Hopefully that'll show up before the weekend, and hopefully it'll have the right plug on there so I can finish this project. Then hopefully I can get this one exchanged for one with the right plug, and then we can just carry that one as a spare. We just got a text from the local glass guy saying that our mirrors are ready for the head. So a bit of a walk might be nice to calm the nerves and lower the blood pressure. And also it is our only way of picking up the mirrors, seeing as we sold the car last week. It took about an hour, but we made it back to the boat. Those are two beautiful new mirrors. They're safety mirrors, meaning that if we break them, we're not going to have shards of glass go flying everywhere, but they are still made of glass, so they are fragile, which poses a little bit of an interesting conundrum about how to mount them. The big mirror is going to go here, the small mirror is going to go over there. Our first idea was to adhere both of them in place, but as you can see there are 4 bolts over here. Those bolts are used for securing the TV. It's just bolted right through the bulkhead, which means it's incredibly flat and low profile, which I really like. TVs don't last forever, and adhering a giant mirror over at least 2 of the bolts we need to be able to get to replace the TV doesn't really seem like the best of ideas. When I purchased Athena, there were a couple of mirrors that were mounted using little rubber gaskety doodads like this one right here. These things go along with some special screws that have threads in the top of them so you can screw in a little decorative cap to hide the screw. We couldn't find any of that stuff here in Denmark, so we had to order it from the UK. It took a while to get here, but we finally have it and we have the mirrors ready, so let's go ahead and get them put up. With the mirrors in place, I'm not entirely sure we'll be able to remove the headliner, so as often the case in DIY boat projects, once you start something, it's like pulling a loose thread on a knitted sweater. To be able to put up lights in the head, we need to remove the headliner and also run some wires. To run those wires, the headliner and basically the rest of the boat needs to come down, so I figured we might as well put up the remaining lights in the saloon at the same time. Turns out the easiest and quickest part of the install the mirrors project was to, well, actually install the mirrors. That took about 10 minutes. All the fiddling with the lights and the wiring took a couple of hours. Ta-da! A head with not only lights, also a couple of mirrors, and a single cabinet door. We haven't put up the cabinet doors over here or below the vanity yet because those hinges are out of stock and won't be back in stock until sometime in October. So those are going to have to wait a little bit, but I do think the head is coming along nicely.
It's been a tough week with not having the parts we need and things not showing up, but I'm really excited that the mirrors are up. Not because I can stare at myself all day, but because for me, a lot of the interior projects help Athena feel like she's really coming together. Now, I know mirrors have nothing to do with being able to sail, and I know Mads isn't as excited about them as I am, but when we're at a halt with some of the bigger projects and we can get some of these smaller projects done, I get really excited. I get excited because we're still working towards one of our goals, which is to make Athena our home. And do not get me wrong, I understand why Mads is excited to finish projects like the Bilge and the autopilot. I want to finish those things too. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of Skiva. On days like today, when we can't get much of anything else done, I still feel a huge sense of accomplishment because Athena is really starting to feel like our home.
Despite us being a little hamstrung in what we can actually work on this week due to missing doohickeys and wrong plugs, thank you, Whale, there is one important task here that I can go ahead and hopefully knock out in a few hours, and it's this one: trim standing rigging. I'm no rigging expert, but I do have a secret weapon. I believe this is referred to as a book or a book, something like that. It's an ancient technology. Information is stored inside of this thing, and you access that information by flipping these pages. All kidding aside, I picked up this so I'd have something to peruse while sailing, and maybe we could fiddle around with the sails a little bit, just have some fun. But it turns out there's an excellent little chapter in the back of this about tuning the rig. I'm sure there's a ton of books that covers this topic, but the illustrations in this book are really nice and the descriptions are short and very precise, so I like it. According to the book, the first step is to make sure that the mast is nice and straight sideways, so let's attempt that. I've loosened all of the standing rigging so that it's nice and slack. The boom here is supported by the vang, and yeah, I think we can check the mast for sideways straightness. That's done by using a halyard to check the length on each side. If those are the same, then the mast should be straight. After much checking and fiddling about, I think we're spot on. But yeah, I'll feel better once I get a few turns on these turnbuckles again. I know the mast is not going to come off, but the rig is very loose right now. Next on the list is to balance the mast fore and aft, and again, that's using that halyard and a heavy object. And it does look like we've got a little bit too much mast rake. According for the book, for a masthead rig, you want to be between 0.5 and 1%. And right now, according to this chart down here, we are closer to 2% than 1%. So I need to bring the entire mast forward by a tiny bit. I should be able to do that by simply shortening the headstay. The backstay is as loose as I can get it, and we're sitting just a hair above 1%, so I'm gonna call that good enough. There's no more turning left in the turnbuckles on the backstay, so yeah, this will have to be good enough. From here, it doesn't look completely horrible, but to be honest, my main concern for now is just to make sure the mast stays put. Using a 2-meter measuring doohickey is the method the book describes to make sure you get enough tension on your shrouds. The book recommends going to 15% of the braking load, which is a 3mm elongation, meaning there should be a 3mm gap between the bottom of the measuring doohickey and the turnbuckle. But much as the plugs on that whale pump, something has popped up that has stopped me dead in my tracks. Something up there. I was talking to a super nice guy here from the marina that pointed out that I've got too much tension on the struts up there. That means the top of the mast is not straight but has an ever so slight curve forward, which is not what you want. Now to fix that, I do need to loosen the turnbuckles on the shrouds, but those are kind of way up there. Right up there. Not that high up, but high enough that I would need some kind of climbing doohickey. I'll get one of those climbing doohickeys ordered. Meanwhile, Jesper, the really nice guy that pointed out the issue with the strut, has offered to come tomorrow, bring his own gear, and help me fix it, so that's pretty awesome. Meanwhile, the extra pump I ordered has showed up, so let's open it up and see what kind of connectors on there. It is also the small yellow connector. And, well, I now know why they've changed to this connector. From what I've learned, back in February, Whale switched out this old style plug for the new, much smaller style plug with the little yellow doodad on there. The reason for them switching is that Deutsche apparently sold off the tooling to make this connector here, so they had some issues getting them, and that's why they switched to this new plug, which I guess is fine. It's just a little bit frustrating in this situation. I received this two-way manifold a few months back with the old connector, and then last week I received this bilge strainer also with the old connector and this pump. So clearly there's a mixed supply floating around out there now. Whale offered to send me one of their prototypes for this new adapter, so that's pretty cool, but like I said, it's not really something that is available yet, which is a shame. But Whale does get a big thumbs up for their technical support. That was super awesome, but I really wish they would have put out some information about this change in the connectors on the interwebs. That way I could just have looked it up there. But yeah, fingers crossed the adapter is going to be available soon. Of course, I could also just chop off all of the connectors and solder the wires together, but a big part of what appeals about this product to me is the fact that you can easily swap out the pump in case you need to, and that I would lose by soldering the cables together. After a fair bit of hose wrangling and a little bit of fiddling around with some wiring, we should be ready to test. Here's what the manifold looks like installed in the bilge. And here underneath the vanity is the pump. It's hiding behind the drain from the sink. I need to move that strainer and do a bit of tidying up in here, but it'll be spiffy in the end. Let's close this to see if the sink leaks, because this is also the first test of the pressurized water and the sink here in the head. Here goes. Nothing. Everything is nice and dry up under here. Let's take the pump for a spin. The pump should start automatically when the sensor sees water, so let's open this and just let it run for a bit. The Gulper is a little bit on the loud side, but yeah, it's okay. Now the sink here in the galley and the one in the head both work, which is awesome. But what's even more awesome is the fact that now we have both running cold and hot water. Maybe it was last week or the week before, but I installed a water heater here in the cockpit, and that is now hooked up to our hydronic heater. I've been running the diesel heater for a little bit, and now we have hot water. The water heater also can heat water with electricity, but that feature is not hooked up yet. So the only way we can have hot water right now is to run the hydronic heater. Before I forget, if you're wondering why we need a pump to get rid of the water from the sink and the shower, well, we don't really need it for the sink, but we do need it for the shower because that's way below the water line. So yeah, there's no way to drain that other than pumping it overboard. Also, before I forget, during the installation of the through hull, I mentioned our marriage savers, which are these two wireless headsets. The reason we purchased these are so that we can stay in communication if it's really windy outside, so we don't have to shout at each other, or if somebody is, for instance, installing a through hull on the outside of the boat while the other person is tightening the nut on the inside. There are a couple of different brands available for marriage savers, but I really like these ones because they only cover one ear, so you can still kind of hear what's going on around you. I can take a guess at why these have the nickname they do, because when you live in a marina, you see a lot of boats coming into dock, and if it's a little bit bad weather and maybe it's a little bit of a stressful situation, there's often a little bit of yelling involved. With these, we'll be able to calmly curse sweet nothings directly into each other's ears without the rest of the marina being able to hear what we're up to. I had hoped that I'd be able to move this trim, the standing rigging, into done this week, but yeah, you're supposed to show up in a couple of hours, but we are out of video shooting time for this week, so yeah, that's not gonna make it in the video, but hopefully we'll get it done tonight. Now, there's some very exciting news for next week, because with a little bit of luck, we might be able to leave Skive by the end of the week. Now, that will require me to install the autopilot, get the alternator wired up, and also get the genset dragged aboard. Those are three pretty big tasks, but with a little bit of luck, I think we might pull it off. Sorry for the abrupt ending of this video. Time kind of got away from me earlier today when I was fiddling with the water heater to get that to work. So yeah, I'm out of video shooting time and I have to hurry to start rendering this. But yeah, we hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you!
See you!